The British Mandate for Palestine, shortly Mandate for Palestine, or the Palestine Mandate, was a League of Nations mandate for the territory that had formerly constituted the Ottoman Empire: Sanjaks of Nablus, Acre, the southern part of the Vilayet of Syria, the southern portion of the Beirut Vilayet, and the Mutasarrifate of Jerusalem. Prior to the Armistice of Mudros, the draft of the Mandate for Palestine was formally confirmed by the Council of the League of Nations on 24 July 1922, supplemented via the 16 September 1922 Transjordan Memorandum, and then came into effect on 29 September 1923 following the ratification of the Treaty of Lausanne. The mandate ended at midnight on 14 May 1948. The Palestine Mandate legalized the temporary rule of Palestine by Great Britain. The document was based on the principles contained in Article 22 of the Covenant of the League of Nations and the San Remo Resolution of 25 April, 1920, by the principal Allied and associated powers after the First World War. The objective of the League of Nations mandate system was to administer parts of the defunct Ottoman Empire, which had been in control of the Middle East since the 16th century, until such time as they are able to stand alone. The approximate northern border with the French mandate was agreed upon in the Paulet-Newcomb Agreement of 23 December 1920. Transjordan had been a no-man's land following the July 1920 Battle of Maze Allen. During this period, the British chose to avoid any definite connection with Palestine until a March 1921 conference at which it was agreed that Abdullah bin Hussein would administer the territory under the auspices of the Palestine Mandate. The Transjordan Memorandum annulled the articles regarding the Jewish national home in the territory east of the Jordan. It also established a separate administration of Transjordan for the application of the mandate, under the general supervision of Great Britain. On 18 April 1946, Transjordan was formally separated from the Palestine Mandate, with Abdullah remaining the king. Background: military defeat of the Ottoman Empire. When the Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers in the First World War in April 1915, it threatened Britain's communications with India via the Suez Canal, besides other strategic interests of the Allies. The conquest of Palestine became part of British strategies aimed at establishing a land bridge between the Mediterranean and the Persian Gulf. This would enable rapid deployment of troops to the Gulf, then the forward line of defense for British interests in India, and protect against invasion from the north by Russia. A land bridge was also an alternative to the Suez Canal. In response to French initiatives, the United Kingdom established the de Bunsen Committee in 1915 to consider the nature of British objectives in Turkey and Asia in the event of a successful conclusion of the war. The committee considered various scenarios and provided guidelines for negotiations with France, Italy, and Russia regarding the partitioning of the Ottoman Empire. The committee recommended in favor of the creation of a decentralized and federal Ottoman state in Asia. At the same time, the British and French also opened overseas fronts with the Gallipoli and Mesopotamian campaigns. In Gallipoli, the Turks successfully repelled the British, French and Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. From 1915, Zionist leader and Anglophile Ted E. V. Jabotinsky was pressing the British to agree to the formation of a Zionist volunteer corps that would serve under the aegis of the British Army. The British eventually agreed to set up the Zion Mule Corps, which assisted in the failed invasion of Gallipoli. After Lloyd George was made Prime Minister during the war, the British waged the Sinai and Palestine campaign under General Allenby. This time the British agreed to a Jewish Legion, which participated in the invasion. Russian Jews regarded the German army as a liberator, and the creation of the Legion was designed to encourage them to participate in the war on Britain's side. At the same time, British intelligence officer T.E. Lawrence was encouraging an Arab revolt led by the Sharif of Mecca. The British defeated Ottoman Turkish forces in 1917 and occupied Ottoman Syria, which would later be divided to British Palestine and Transjordan and French Syria and Lebanon. The land remained under British military administration for the remainder of the war, and beyond occupied enemy territory administration. The Ottoman Empire capitulated on 30 October 1918, and on 23 November 1918, a military edict was issued dividing Ottoman territories into occupied enemy territory administrations. The Middle East was divided into three OETAs. Occupied enemy territory administration south extended from the Egyptian border of Sinai into Palestine and Lebanon as far north as Acre and Nablus, and as far east as the River Jordan. A temporary British military governor, Major General Sir Arthur Wigram Money, would administer this sector. At that time, General Allenby assured Emir Faisal that the Allies were in honour bound to endeavour to reach a settlement in accordance with the wishes of the peoples concerned, and urged him to place his trust wholeheartedly in their good faith. In October 1919, British forces in Syria and the last British soldiers stationed east of the Jordan were withdrawn, and the region came under exclusive control of Faisal bin Hussein from Damascus. Negotiations. During and after World War I, Britain made conflicting and shifting commitments regarding the future division and governance of the region, including those announced in the Balfour Declaration of 1917, the Sykes-Picot Agreement, the McMahon-Hussein Correspondence, and the Churchill White Paper of 1922. 1916 Sykes-Picot Agreement. In 1916, Britain and France concluded the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which proposed to divide the Middle East between them into spheres of influence, with Palestine as an international enclave. The British made two potentially conflicting promises regarding the territory it was expecting to acquire. In the McMahon-Hussein Correspondence of 1915, Britain had promised Hussein bin Ali, Sharif of Mecca, through T.E. Lawrence, independence for an Arab country covering most of the Arab Middle East in exchange for his support, while also promising to create and foster a Jewish national home in Palestine. In the Balfour Declaration of 1917, the Sykes-Picot Agreement did not call for Arab sovereignty, but for the suzerainty of an Arab chief, and an international administration, the form of which is to be decided upon after consultation with Russia, and subsequently in consultation with the other allies and the representatives of the Sheriff of Mecca. Under the terms of that agreement, the Zionist organization needed to secure an agreement along the lines of the Faisal-Weizmann Agreement with the Sheriff of Mecca. 1919 Paris Peace Conference. At the Peace Conference in 1919, Emir Faisal, speaking on behalf of King Hussein, asked for Arab independence, or at minimum the right to pick the mandatory. In the end, he recommended an Arab state under a British mandate. The World Zionist Organization also asked for a British mandate, and asserted the historic title of the Jewish people to Palestine. A confidential appendix to the report of the 1919 King Crane Commission observed that the Jews are distinctly for Britain as mandatory power, because of the Balfour Declaration, and that the French resent the payment by the English to the Emir Faisal of a large monthly subsidy, which they claim covers a multitude of bribes, and enables the British to stand off and show clean hands while Arab agents do dirty work in their interest. The Faisal-Weizmann Agreement called for British mediation of any disputes. It also called for the establishment of borders, after the Versailles Peace Conference, by a commission to be formed for the purpose. The World Zionist Organization later submitted to the Peace Conference a proposed map of the territory that did not include the area east of the Hejaz Railway, including most of Transjordan. In a meeting at Deauville in 1919, David Lloyd George of the UK and Georges Clemenceau of France finalised the Anglo-French settlement of 1–4 December 1918. The new agreement allocated Palestine and the Vilayet of Mosul to the British in exchange for British support of French influence in Syria and Lebanon. At the Paris Peace Conference, Prime Minister Lloyd George told Georges Clemenceau and the other allies that the McMahon-Hussein correspondence was a treaty obligation. He explained that the agreement with Hussein had actually been the basis for the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and that the French could not use the proposed League of Nations mandate system to break the terms of the agreement. He pointed out that the French had agreed not to occupy the area of the independent Arab state, or Confederation of States, with their military forces, including the areas of Damascus, Homs, Hama, and Aleppo. British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour and U.S. President Woodrow Wilson were present at the meeting. The open negotiations began at the Paris Peace Conference, continued at the Conference of London, and took definite shape only after the San Remo Conference in April 1920. There the Allied Supreme Council granted the mandates for Palestine and Mesopotamia to Britain, and those for Syria and Lebanon to France. In August 1920, this was officially acknowledged in the Treaty of Chevreuse. Both Zionist and Arab representatives attended the conference, where they signed the Faisal-Weizmann Agreement. The agreement was never implemented. 1920 San Remo Conference. The San Remo Conference assigned the mandate for Palestine to the United Kingdom under Article 22 of the Covenant of the League of Nations. The Allies also decided to make the UK responsible for putting into effect its own Balfour Declaration of 1917. France required the continuation of its religious protectorate in Palestine, but Italy and Great Britain opposed it. France lost the religious protectorate, but thanks to the Holy See continued to enjoy liturgical honours in mandatory Palestine until 1924, when the honours were abolished. The boundaries of the mandated territories at San Remo were not precisely defined. Chaim Weizmann subsequently reported to his WZO colleagues in London, "There are still important details outstanding, such as the actual terms of the mandates and the question of the boundaries in Palestine. There is the delimitation of the boundary between French Syria and Palestine, which will constitute the northern frontier and the eastern line of demarcation, adjoining Arab Syria." The mandate was a legal and administrative instrument, not a geographical territory. The territorial jurisdiction of the mandate was subject to change by treaty, capitulation, grant, usage, sufferance or other lawful means. The document was based on the principles contained in Article 22 of the Draft Covenant of the League of Nations and the San Remo Resolution of 25 April 1920 by the principal Allied and associated powers after the First World War. The mandate formalized British rule in the southern part of Ottoman Syria from 1923 to 1948. Each of the principal Allied powers had a hand in drafting the proposed mandate, although some, including the United States, had not declared war on the Ottoman Empire and did not become members of the League of Nations. Spring 1919, at the Paris Peace Conference, informal discussion began between the Zionist organization and British representatives. A first draft was presented on 15 July 1919. After Lord Curzon had replaced Arthur Balfour as Foreign Secretary, the draft was reconsidered. A second draft was presented on 10 June 1920. In the second draft, the paragraph recognizing the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine was removed from the preamble. Self-governing Commonwealth was replaced by self-governing institutions. Also, the recognition of the establishment of the Jewish national home as the guiding principle in the execution of the mandate was omitted from the first draft. After strenuous objection to the proposed changes, the statement regarding the historical connections of the Jews with Palestine was reincorporated into the mandate in December 1920. The draft was submitted to the League of Nations on 6 December 1920. Establishment of a national home for the Jewish people. The preamble of the Mandate document declared, whereas the principal Allied powers have also agreed that the mandatory should be responsible for putting into effect the declaration originally made, on November 2, 1917, by the government of His Britannic Majesty, and adopted by the said powers, in favor of the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, it being clearly understood that nothing should be done which might prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. The British Foreign Secretary, Lord Curzon, together with the Italian and French governments, rejected early drafts of the mandate because they had contained a passage which read, recognizing, moreover, the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine and the claim which this gives them to reconstitute it, their national home. The Palestine Committee set up by the Foreign Office recommended that the reference to the claim be omitted. The Allies had already noted the historical connection in the Treaty of Sèvres, but they had not acknowledged a legal claim. Lord Balfour suggested an alternative which was accepted, whereas recognition has thereby, i.e., by the Treaty of Sèvres, been given to the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine, and to the grounds for reconstituting their national home in that country. Article 4 of the Mandate provided for the recognition of an appropriate Jewish agency as a public body for the purpose of advising and cooperating with the administration of Palestine in such economic, social and other matters as may affect the establishment of the Jewish national home and the interests of the Jewish population of Palestine, effectively establishing the Jewish agency. The Vatican, the Italian, and the French governments continued to press their own legal claims on the basis of the former Protectorate of the Holy See and the French Protectorate of Jerusalem. The idea of an international commission to resolve claims on the holy places had been formalized in Article 95 of the Treaty of Sèvres, and taken up again in Article 14 of the Palestinian Mandate. Negotiations concerning the formation and the role of the Commission were partly responsible for the delay in ratifying the mandate. The UK assumed responsibility for the holy places under Article 13 of the mandate. However, it never created the Commission on Holy Places to resolve the other claims in accordance with Article 14 of the mandate. The High Commissioner established the authority of the Orthodox rabbinate over the members of the Jewish community and retained a modified version of the old Ottoman millet system. Article 22 of the Covenant of the League of Nations. The preamble of the Mandate document states that the mandate is granted to Britain for the purpose of giving effect to the provisions of Article 22 of the Covenant of the League of Nations. That article, which concerns entrusting tutelage of colonies formerly under German and Turkish sovereignty to advanced nations with specific regard to communities formerly belonging to the Turkish Empire, that they have reached a stage of development where their existence as independent nations can be provisionally recognized subject to the rendering of administrative advice and assistance by a mandatory until such time as they are able to stand alone. Throughout the period of the mandate, Palestinian leaders cited this as proving their assertion that the British were obliged under the terms of the mandate to facilitate the eventual creation of an independent Arab state in Palestine.